Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking into this, this is a fascinating case, really. We're going to be looking into Tim Omotoso in South Africa.
Oh, yeah.
He's known for a lot of people follow his biblical teachings, but also for some incredible miracles.
Yes. So Reverend Tim Omotoso is a Nigerian televangelist who was arrested in South Africa back in 2017. He's been denied bail multiple times throughout the legal proceedings, and the trial itself has just been plagued by delays and restarts, which you can imagine has only fueled speculation and frustration.
Right, because it's not just about the accuser, it's about the accused too, right? Everyone's lives are on hold.
One of the prosecutors actually died during this time.
Oh.
Yeah, just delay after delay, and it went on for years, which obviously drew a lot of attention, got people asking, can justice really be served when it takes this long?
Exactly, and it just adds to this whole cloud of uncertainty hanging over the trial.
It's crazy. Every time we peel back a layer of this case, there's another twist waiting. But it wasn't just the witnesses who ended up under scrutiny. The prosecution team themselves, they had some serious allegations leveled against them.
Oh, right. One of the prosecutors in Ntelwa, he was accused of some pretty bad stuff, like talking to witnesses in ways he shouldn't have, and even trying to get them to change their testimony to help his case.
That's huge. Like, you can't have a fair trial if the people presenting the evidence are playing games.
Exactly. It really undermines the whole idea of justice, and it raises questions about the entire prosecution's handling of this case. What Ntelwa did had basically poisoned the whole thing. It created a bias that couldn't be undone.
Even though he was gone.
Yeah, they felt like the damage was already done, and it really threw the integrity of the whole trial into question.
So we've got conflicting witness statements, possible witness tampering, a prosecutor removed from misconduct. No wonder this case caused so much public debate.
Totally. And that's where your questions come in, right?
Yeah.
You've raised some incredibly intriguing points.
Yeah.
From allegations of witness tampering. You've mentioned instances of witnesses changing their statements.
Yeah.
Why is this such a red flag in a legal case?
Well, while it's normal for witnesses to clarify or amend details in their statements as they recall more information, significant and repeated changes, especially without clear explanations, can raise doubts about the reliability of their testimony.
Sure.
It can make it seem like their story's being molded to fit a certain narrative.
You specifically asked why the case was restarted by the South African justice system.
Yeah, so this goes back to 2019 when the original judge, Judge Makola, recused himself from the case due to a perceived conflict of interest. Essentially, there were concerns about his impartiality, so a new judge had to be assigned and the trial had to start over from scratch.
So imagine all the work, all the evidence, all the arguments, everything had to be presented all over again.
Yeah.
It's no wonder people are frustrated by the delays and the perceived lack of progress.
Yeah, it's a major setback, both in terms of time and resources. And it contributes to that feeling that justice is being delayed, which, as the saying goes, is justice denied.
Okay, let's move on to another troubling allegation that you've raised.
Okay.
That prosecutor Ntelwa emailed Reverend Omotoso's lawyer with information against another prosecutor, Makola. What are the implications of something like that?
That's a bombshell allegation. It suggests a level of conflict or even misconduct within the prosecution team itself.
You have also raised concerns about Reverend Omotoso's rights being violated in prison based on accounts from former inmates.
Okay.
You specifically asked why his lawyer isn't taking action.
Every accused person, regardless of the charges against them, has basic human rights that need to be protected, even within the confines of prison. And if there are credible allegations of abuse or mistreatment, it's the duty of the defense attorney to investigate those claims and to take appropriate legal action.
So it sounds like there might be a disconnect between what's happening in the prison and what the legal team is aware of, or at least what they're willing to address publicly. There's also a question about COVID-19 restrictions and how they're impacting Reverend Omotoso specifically. You pointed out that he seems to be subject to stricter restrictions than others.
It's possible that some of those stricter protocols are still in place, even if restrictions have eased for the general population.
All right, this next question is a tough one to hear, and I want to approach it with sensitivity.
Okay.
You asked, we hear that Reverend Tim Omotoso was suddenly moved from St. Alvin's prison to a women's prison where he was extremely tortured. Why was this transfer made and under what circumstances?
That's a deeply disturbing allegation, and it really raises concerns about the treatment of inmates within the South African prison system. Africa.
Okay, let's pause here for a moment.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground and we've still got a mountain of questions to climb, but we'll take on the rest in part 2 of this deep dive. Stay with us.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's tackle that yearning head on.
Okay.
We're going to go through each of your questions systematically.
Sounds good.
We'll explore what we know based on all the information you've provided, and maybe we'll uncover some insights along the way.
Fingers crossed.
Here's the question of the Hawks. One of your questions asks why their actions aren't being scrutinized like the Scorpions were.
Oh.
Can you explain who the Hawks and the Scorpions are and why this comparison matters?
So the Scorpions were an elite investigative unit in South Africa that was disbanded in 2009 amidst a lot of controversy.
Oh, okay.
They were known for their aggressive tactics and their willingness to take on high-profile cases, often involving corruption within the government.
Okay.
The Hawks, on the other hand, are the current investigative unit, and this comparison suggests a concern that they might not be subject to the same level of scrutiny or accountability as their predecessors.
So it's about whether they have the same bite, the same willingness to go after powerful figures, even if it ruffles feathers.
Exactly, and it ties into a broader theme of power dynamics and potential corruption within the South African system.
Then there's the psychologist who testified who turned out to not be licensed.
Right.
You even ask, surely this cannot simply be swept under the rug.
No, you're absolutely right to raise that point.
Yeah.
Using an unqualified professional as an expert witness is a major breach of protocol.
Right.
It calls into question the validity of their entire testimony, and it raises concerns about whether the prosecution did their due diligence in vetting their experts.
You know, this situation makes me wonder if this is kind of like a systemic issue within the South African legal system.
Mm-hmm.
Could there be other cases where unqualified experts have been used, potentially leading to wrongful convictions or acquittals? It's a chilling thought.
That's a very astute observation,
Yeah.
and it speaks to a potential vulnerability that deserves further investigation,
Yeah.
This case could be the tip of the iceberg, revealing a need for stricter regulations and oversight regarding expert witness qualifications.
You've also asked why no international human rights organizations have addressed the alleged violations in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
International human rights organizations play a vital role in shining a light on abuses and advocating for justice.
Absolutely.
However, they often have limited resources, and they prioritize cases based on their severity, their potential impact, and strategic considerations.
So it's possible this case hasn't reached their radar yet, or perhaps they're still gathering information before taking a public stance?
That's certainly possible. It's also worth noting that the involvement of international organizations can sometimes be seen as meddling or interference in domestic affairs.
Oh, for sure.
So there might be political sensitivities at play.
Okay, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the role of politics in this case.
Oh,
You've expressed concern about the involvement of various political parties, specifically the ANC, or the African National Congress, and the DA, the Democratic Alliance.
mm-hmm.
You've mentioned the ANC Women's League being particularly vocal about this case, but you're also curious about the DA's stance.
The question of political influence on the judiciary is always a sensitive one.
For sure.
In this case, the ANC's outspoken stance has definitely raised eyebrows.
Yeah.
Some might see it as an attempt to exert pressure on the legal process, while others might view it as genuine advocacy for victims of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
The DA, on the other hand, hasn't been as publicly engaged with this case, at least not according to the information that we have.
So even the lack of involvement becomes part of the narrative, right? It makes you wonder if there's a reluctance to challenge the ruling party on such a high-profile case.
Precisely. It speaks to the complexities of power dynamics and political allegiances within South Africa.
And then there's Pamela, the woman who was vocal about women's abuse but was allegedly involved in pimping in Johannesburg.
Right.
That seems like a pretty stark contradiction.
It is.
Yeah.
This apparent hypocrisy raises serious questions about her motives and credibility,
Yeah.
Was she genuinely advocating for victims, or was her involvement in the case a calculated move to deflect attention from her own alleged criminal activities?
It's a classic case of the pot calling the kettle black, and it makes you wonder about the agendas of others who have been vocal about this case, right? Are they truly seeking justice, or do they have ulterior motives?
Yeah, it's a valid question, and it reinforces the need to critically examine the narratives surrounding this case. Concerned about the potential for hidden motives, political manipulation, and a lack of transparency within high-profile cases in South Africa.